to the next one. And you can see that we're kind of highlighting the key points as we're going through here, and as Ryan mentioned, we'll send out the deck afterwards. So, Elsa, you want to read this one?
I have found this the most frustrating challenge to strategic planning effectiveness is developing a methodical way to monetize the investment, time, people, resources. I need to prove an ROI. So I need to do this to justify the investment just like any other project or system. I don't believe it should be so narrow as focusing on a single revenue goal or simplistic as aggregating the metrics of a few goals. But that is what I'm looking at. Do you have any recommendations on how we can do this better?
So that's
a mouthful.
That is a mouthful. So I think that's a really interesting question. The nuts and bolts of it, of course, being, how do we prove that strategic planning makes a difference? And so, we have done some research ourselves on does strategic planning and a commitment to strategic planning actually does it drive bottom line results? And that's what we're looking at with our ROI, right? The return on investment of the time and if you're using external resources invested in the strategic planning process. So the research that we found resulted in the fact that those that had a stronger commitment to strategic management, so that is not just the planning but the execution of it, showed a 12% bottom line increase and an 11% top line increase greater than those that didn't. So this is in addition to business as usual, and this is also, this research was done a couple of years ago, so it's subject to change given economic conditions. But the end point of our research did result in the fact that those organizations that committed to a strategic management process did show a bottom line and a top line increase more than those that didn't. But I think what's interesting about this is strategic management. I call it, it's considered a secondary business process. Primary business processes being, budgeting, human resource management, that type of stuff. And so strategic planning or strategic management tends to fall on that. Well, we kind of should do it. We know we should, but we don't have to. And that's sort of true, actually. You sort of don't have to. And I think that the compelling reason to have a rigorous, effective strategic management process in place as part of your standard operating procedures is because of the all of the tangential benefits of aligning those resources and people of the time and money that we have towards those critical things that we're actually trying to get accomplished. And those great companies do that. And I think Jim Collins' recent book, Great by Choice, really hammers home the idea around paranoid productivity. And you can't be paranoid about your productivity and paranoid about where you're headed if we're not all headed in the same direction and everything's sort of adding up to the same set of goals. And that's fairly simplistic, but very true. So, Elsa, what are any thoughts to add to that? Any kind of recent experience as we've been working through this as well with other organizations?
It's really interesting because I was just asked by a healthcare administrator, everything seems to be going well in our organization. I can't seem to prove return on investment when we do strategic planning, so, what's the benefit? And so this kind of leads us into an area, and I don't want to stray away from this question, but again, if we have all of the facets of our organization totally aligned so that we have a real good balance, we're working on all components of the organization, can you imagine how much better it would be financially if we do invest in focus on all of the resources that are available to us? So again, because we aren't maybe tracking return on investment in the more intangible ways, leads us to believe that we don't need strategic planning. But for the most part, to see return on investment, get everything in line, make all of the facets of the organization work, and you'll start seeing a return on investment. You'll be able to know where you were a year ago and where you will be in a year and a half, and know that it has benefited the organization. You may be one of those organizations that experiences a 12 to 15% improvement on your bottom line.
That's right.
Absolutely.
I think it also, on its face value, we all think that strategic planning is the obvious and right thing to do and the right way to run a business, right? So I think that that's an organization, and I think that's just kind of probably a core belief. It's kind of It's like somebody said yesterday in one of my sessions, it's like disagreeing with motherhood. We're not going to do that, right? But what we can criticize is the over-processing of a strategic planning process, and I think a lot of us have been involved in those over-processed planning engagements where, quite honestly, we are eroding the ROI and the benefits of planning because we're doing more of the planning than we are of the execution, and that you've tipped to the wrong side. And I think the last one last point on this too is, ultimately we're trying to make more certain the future that we're striving to achieve, right? And so I mentioned to somebody else the other day, I said, if you're not trying to be in a different place tomorrow than you are today, then you don't need a strategic plan. And ultimately, the result of your strategic plan should be those metrics that are in your plan, and then moving the dial on those metrics. And we don't just get to set metrics and ask for movement on metrics without an underlying set of things to make that happen, right? AKA employee retention or, customer satisfaction or all of those things.
And that's the best way to validate return on investment. If you have your goals written in a way that you definitely can measure them, that you can track how you're doing, then obviously that is going to be the clear-cut way to get you to understand what your return is on your time and investment of resources. Absolutely.
Yeah.